So last, but certainly not least, is Peter Barnes. Yeah. So I imagine many of you know that he is the founder of Mesa Refuge. And Peter's journey began, he was an entrepreneur and writer who was focused on fixing the flaws of capitalism. His books and writing explore how we can protect and share common wealth. The titles of his books further explain this point of view. Ours, The Case for Universal Property, Who Owns the Sky, Capitalism 3.0, With Liberty and Dividends for All. Peter began his career as a reporter for the Lowell Sun, then Newsweek, and the New Republic. In 1976, he co-founded a worker-owned solar energy company in San Francisco, and in 1983, he co-founded Working Assets Money Market Fund. And he served as the president of Working Assets Long Distance, which is now Credo Mobile. In 1997, Peter founded Mesa Refuge and single-handedly ran the organization for the first 15 years. He has served as the board chair, and he's currently a board member, and he is our next door neighbor. And he has read every single application over the past 25 years. That is a lot of applications.
Oh gosh, thank you so much, Kamala. I appreciate all that you're doing these days to keep the Mesa Refuge thriving. So, can you hear me okay? Yes. It blows my mind, frankly, that 25 years ago in that house, which is where I live, I had the idea to start this place over here. I should explain that, Kamala gave my background, in my previous life when I was in the city writing and doing business and all that. Finally, I decided to get out of the business aspect of that, and was able to do that by selling my shares to my partners back in 1995. And fortunately, shortly after that, I ran into Sue Connolly, who at the time was living in number 7 Los Reyes Drive, where one of our recent board members, Sam Lawson, currently lives. Anyway, Sue said, hey, that house, number 9, where I now live, is on the market. You should buy it. So of course I always do what Sue tells me to do, fortunately. Anyway, after living in number 9 for a few months, this house came on the market. As one of the earlier people mentioned, the artist Sam Francis used to live here, and the next door house was his studio. And he built this wooden walkway to connect the two, so in his older years he could be wheeled from his house to his studio. Anyway, I thought I might actually try to buy this place and turn it into a writer's retreat. Why did I think that? I'll come back to that in a second. But before I get into that story, I just wanted to, first of all, thank a few people. I mean, all the people there have been so many people who have helped the Mesa Refuge over the years that I can't possibly name them all, but I want to single out just a few who have helped in interesting ways. Harriet Barlow was the executive director of Blue Mountain Center, which is an excellent writer's retreat in upstate New York, where I went. I can't even remember when. It was probably 35, 40 years ago when I was a young writer. And thank you. Met Harriet, had this great experience at Blue Mountain Center, and never having had been to a writer's retreat before, having all that time and space and beauty and being surrounded by other creative people was an amazing experience that I have never forgotten. And I said to Harriet as I was walking out the door that if I am ever in a position to give something back to the universe, I think I would like to give something like this, because the world needs more places like this. People need to be able to get away from all the noise, I don't have to tell you, and think and create. So that idea was planted in the back of my brain for 10, 15 years. I certainly was not in a position to do anything like that for quite some time. But when I moved out here and moved there, and then this house came on the market, I thought, aha, what did I say to Harriet 20 years ago? This might be the time. And so I talked to Joe Sewell, our local realtor, and said, what's the story here? He said, well, they're having an auction, a probate auction in Los Angeles, and if you want, you can put in a bid. So I said, okay, well, I'll put in a low bid and see what happens. So that's what I did, and my wife and I flew down there, and we were kind of expecting some kind of a bidding war, which we would not have won, but nobody else bid. So amazingly, miraculously, this place was meant to be, and that was the beginning. But I digress. I wanted to acknowledge Harriet. The second person I want to acknowledge is Susan Tillett. Yes. Most of you know Susan. She was our executive director for 9 years after I stepped aside. And she is the one who is responsible for having turned what was kind of a ramshackle jury-rigged thing with various fiscal agents and stuff like that. Did not have its own 501c3, did not have its own board. You know, it was just run out of my hip pocket, basically. Anyway, she turned that into the well-organized institution that we have today. So, thank you, Susan. You did an amazing job. And I just wanted to add, if it's all right with you, Susan, that our hearts are with you today. Susan's son is in the hospital in Chicago, and she's flying back tomorrow. Is that right? He had a major spinal surgery. Anyway, we all wish you, our hearts are with you, and we send all the healing energy that we can.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah. Let's see. One other person, maybe 2 or 3. Where is Josh? Oh, in the back there. Okay. One of the key people in the early years of the Mesa Refuge was Jonathan Rowe, who unfortunately is no longer with us. Jonathan's son, Josh, lived where Harriet now lives, just down the road. And in the early years, Jonathan was extremely helpful in his ways, and Josh was extremely helpful in his, most of which had to do with parking and helping people get their cars parked at events like this. But that was when he was a kid. Now he has graduated George Washington University, has returned to Marin County. He is now working for the county government in San Rafael, and we look forward to seeing him around and having a long, successful career in politics and government, and who knows, maybe the Supreme Court someday.
Yeah.
He says he's going to law school. We'll see. Okay. Moving right along. Oh yes, one other person I would like to mention in passing, if that's the right word. No, it's not. Is one of our earliest residents who passed away last week at the age of 92, Daniel Ellsberg. The world doesn't make many people like Daniel Ellsberg, who had the courage to speak truth to power and to the public at the risk of spending the rest of his life in jail. Dan was known mostly for releasing the Pentagon Papers, which revealed all the lies that our government told us about the Vietnam War. at the Mesa Refuge a few years ago, he worked on his final book, The Doomsday Machine, which is about the whole trigger-ready nuclear system thing that's all over the world right now, and that could one day end life on Earth. Anyway, Dan was a one-off. There are so few people like him, but God knows we need more, and he really embodies in many ways the spirit of the Mesa Refuge. So I want to acknowledge him. Okay, I'm not going to read anything from any of my books. Don't applaud. Yeah, right. But they're all there in the library if you want to read them. But they're mostly about capitalism and climate change and things of that nature, minor problems. So let me skip a bit forward and speak about three last things very briefly. Okay. One is the mission of the Mike. Thank you, Kim. I count on you to keep me presentable. One is it's an impossible task, but good luck. One is the mission of the Mesa Refuge. And as has been said by some of our previous residents, we are a place for writing on the edge. And that's a sort of a double entendre. You know, it refers to the physical edges that Claire talked about, the edges between civilization over there, if you want to call it that, and wilderness over there, and so forth. But it's also about the kind of residents we seek, people who are working on various edges in their fields. And those are the people like Ellsberg, to pick a supreme example, but also like the residents that you've heard from, like many others who are here. James Bell, I have to single out. There are others who are not just writers. In fact, many of them are not actually writers in the professional sense, but they are visionaries, truth tellers, and change makers of all races and genders. And they are the people that we try to attract to the Mesa Refuge. So, lastly, you'll be pleased to know, let me say something about the future. It hasn't been easy to keep the Mesa Refuge going for 25 years, I will say that. Our challenges have included financial crisis, a pandemic, the rotting of most of the walls and roof of this building, and many other things. But we are still here and stronger than ever, and our goal now is to stay here, be here, not just for another 25 years, but in perpetuity. That is our goal. And to do that, we need to, among other things, build an endowment, which is now one of our highest priorities, and you may hear from us about that at some point. So, and as part of this long-term vision of perpetuity, I transferred the ownership of this property, the land and the buildings, from my donor-advised fund that I used to have at the Tides Foundation to a new nonprofit organization, the Mesa Refuge, with its own board and executive director and so forth. You've met most of those people, I'm sure. the purpose of this corporation is to act as the trustee of this property and its mission for future generations. In this respect, it is analogous to MALT, the Marin Agricultural Land Trust, which holds conservation easements in perpetuity for West Marin, and CLAM, which holds affordable housing in perpetuity for West Marin. So why is perpetuity important? If we look at the world today, it doesn't look good, as you know. Our planet, our democracy, and our society are all teetering on various edges. In such a world, we more than ever need refuges for sanity and hope, refuges from which ideas and words can ripple out and change the world. And I'm going to close by quoting one of our early residents, Rebecca Solnit, who said, "Sometimes one person inspires a movement. Sometimes a few passionate people change the world. And all that these transformations have in common is that they begin in the imagination and in hope." So I like to think that some of that imagination and hope that we are desperately needing now and in the future will come from the Mesa Refuge. Thank you.